What is even more disturbing is when one considers the following quote from Manly Palmer Hall's book, America's Assignment with Destiny. Genuine esoteric associations always required that disciples prepared themselves for careers of practical service. The student was expected to attain to a state of unusual skill or proficiency in some branch of learning. He was then to practice this profession or craft as a means of extending his sphere of constructive influence. He was to teach through example, enriching his chosen vocation with the overtones of enlightened religious philosophy, thus gradually creating a significant zone of influence. He was available for whatever task the keepers of the great plan required. Practical ends can only be achieved by practical means, and the agents of the universal reformation must be sufficient for every emergency.
And I believe that they are picking individual people today according to their own design, according to their own agenda. And they are picking individuals today to help enlighten the whole human family.
Then came the third stage, which started in 2003 when I had an ayahuasca experience in Brazil, and a voice talked to me for 5 hours about the nature of reality. Real clear, very funny, and mind-blowing and life-changing.
I have often wondered if Ike has ever taken any precautions to make sure that the entities that he is in contact with are good entities. He often talks about how the Illuminati are in contact with bad extra-dimensional beings, after all.
And the same gods, demonic entities as they're called in this case, that are worshipped by the Satanists, are the same gods that are worshipped by the secret societies and the religions. Unknowingly, in Satanism, it's knowingly.
These reptilian entities seem to operate, and again, it's not just reptilian. There are many different kinds of entities that do not have a human form, that operate just outside of human sight, and history has recorded them as demons and all this stuff.
So I wonder if he had a system to discern whether the ones that he's talking to are the same ones that are influencing the Illuminati. You can imagine I was a bit discouraged to hear things like this.
Well, I've been on a long journey of nearly 20 years now, consciously doing this, and some force has been pushing me in different directions through intuition, through urges. I just got to do this, I've just got to go there. As I've gone through this and followed it, and who the force is and they are, I don't know. I'm not really that interested, funnily enough, because I just go with it, and I'll remember what it's all about when I leave this genetic spacesuit.
Now, here is the mystery, considering all that we have learned so far.
I think there's a lot of this whole New Age area, you know, of ascended masters and all the Blavatsky stuff and Ashtar Command. I say that that is a belief system controlled by the same force, which is also trawling that bloody energy as we go along.
Again, considering everything we've just learned, this is clearly an admission that he has been lied to by the spirits all of his life. I mean, if they told him that they were Alice Bailey's ascended masters, which they did, and they taught him theosophy word for word, which they did, he must be admitting here that all that he was taught is a lie. But the problem is that he has never stopped teaching and promoting the beings he talked to or what they told him to teach. He clearly attributes everything he is to them.
Among these messages that was given to me in 1990 were, he will say things and wonder where they came from. They will be our words. Sometimes we will put knowledge into his mind. Sometimes he will be led to knowledge. And another one was, a little bit later, arduous seeking is not necessary.
Ike never has mentioned the name Alice Bailey in his early books, although in them it's clear that he's teaching her doctrine, things like about the seven rays and the coming evolution, the solar logos, the new age, Atlantis, Lemuria, the age of Aquarius, being destroyed because of bad evolution, the earth spirit, the moon problem, her particular brand of reincarnation, even wearing certain colors. He never once, though, attributes any of it to her. He attributes it all to the spirits that he channeled. He says he got all this information from the spirit world, which I'm willing to believe. And therefore I suppose it's possible that he hasn't made the connection that everything he believes is from Alice Bailey himself yet. He may have never noticed that what the spirits told him was word for word Alice Bailey and or Theosophy.
Alice Bailey was a disciple of the Luciferian Theosophist H.P. Blavatsky. She praised Blavatsky in the acknowledgement page of her work, A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, when she stated that the book was, quote, dedicated with gratitude to Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, that great disciple who lighted her in the East and brought the light to Europe and America in 1875, unquote. Alice Bailey never claimed to write any of her 24 books, but rather that the Tibetan spirit guide Shual Kul wrote them. In other words, Bailey was channeling the spirit. Foster Bailey, Alice Ann Bailey's husband, stated in his book, Running God's Plan, that modern esotericism is a new phenomenon in the Western world, pioneered by the Tibetan teacher Shual Kul. Working with H.P. Blavatsky, again this time working with Alice Ann Bailey, the same master teacher has provided the interim teaching needed for conscious entry into the new Aquarian Age. The study of this new teaching in the books published under the name of Alice Bailey is producing a revival of esotericism and a new technique for self-development, this time with the selfless goal of world service. Alice Bailey founded the Lucifer Publishing Company in 1920, but the name changed to Lucis Trust in 1922. Terry Melanson from ConspiracyArchive.com stated the following on how Lucis Trust is run. Lucis Trust is run through an international board of trustees, whose membership is said to have included John D. Rockefeller, Norman Cousins, Robert S. McNamara, Thomas Watson Jr., IBN former U.S. Ambassador to Moscow, Henry Clausen, Grand Commander of the Supreme Council 33rd Degree, Southern District, Scottish Rite, and Henry Kissinger. This would then tie Bailey's influential occult organization into the international conspiracy of elitists, including the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergs, and the Trilateral Commission. Many of these people are involved in tax-exempt foundations. These foundations have massively altered life in the United States over the last few decades. The following gives an example of how these men and these organizations are trying to alter education in the United States and through many other similar organizations in other countries around the world.
The story you are about to hear represents a missing piece in the puzzle of modern history. Without this knowledge, many contemporary events are simply beyond understanding. You are about to hear a man tell you that the major tax-exempt foundations of this land, since at least 1945, have been operating to promote a hidden agenda. And that agenda has nothing to do with the surface appearance of charity, good works, or philanthropy. The man who tells this story is none other than Mr. Norman Dodd, who in 1954 was the staff director of the Congressional Special Committee to investigate tax-exempt foundations, sometimes referred to as the Reese Committee, in recognition of its chairman, Congressman Carroll Reese. Mr. Dodd, you have spoken before about some interesting things that were discovered by Catherine Casey at the Carnegie Endowment. Can you tell us that story, please?
Yes, I'm glad to, Mr. Griffin. This experience that you have just referred to came about in response to a letter which I had written to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, asking certain questions and gathering certain information. And on the arrival of that letter, Dr. Johnson, who was then president of the Carnegie Endowment, telephoned me and said, did I ever come up to New York? And I said, yes, I did, more or less each weekend. And he said, well, when you're next here, will you drop in and see us? Which I did. And again, on arrival at the office of the endowment, I found myself in the presence of Dr. Joseph Johnson, the president, who was a successor to Alger Hiss, two vice presidents, and their own counsel, a partner in the firm, Sullivan and Cromwell. And Dr. Johnson said, after, again, amenities. Mr. Dodd, we have your letter. We can answer all those questions, but it'd be a great deal of trouble. And we have a counter-suggestion. And our counter-suggestion is that if you can spare a member of your staff for 2 weeks and send that member up to New York, we will give to that member a room in the library and the minute books of this foundation since its inception. And we think that whatever you want to find out or the Congress wants to find out will be obvious from those minutes. What could possibly be wrong with foundations? They do so much good. Well, in the face of that sincere conviction of Catherine's, I went out of my way not to prejudice her in any way. But I did explain to her that she couldn't possibly cover 50 years of handwritten minutes in 2 weeks. So she would have to do what we call spot reading. And I blocked out certain periods of time to concentrate on. And off she went to New York. She came back at the end of 2 weeks with the following in the way of, on dictaphone belts. We are now at the year 1908, which was the year that the Carnegie began operations. And in that year, the trustees, meeting for the first time, raised a specific question, which they discussed throughout the balance of the year in a very learned fashion. And the question is there any means known more effective than war, assuming you wish to alter the life of an entire people? And they conclude that no more effective means than war to that end is known to humanity. And finally, of course, we are, the war is over. At that time, their interest shifts over to preventing what they call a reversion of life in the United States to what it was prior to 1914, when World War I broke out. And they arrive at that point, they come to the conclusion that to prevent a reversion, we must control education in the United States. And they realize that that's a pretty big task. So to them, it is too big for them alone, so they approach the Rockefeller Foundation with the suggestion that that portion of education which could be considered domestic be handled by the Rockefeller Foundation, and that portion which is international should be handled by the endowment. And they then decide that the key to the success of these two operations lay in an alteration of the teaching of American history.
Alice Bailey stated, in the externalization of the hierarchy, educators and psychologists of vision in every country must be mobilized, and the pattern of things to come for the children must be intelligently determined. This will have to be done on an international scale, and with the wisdom which comes from a grasp of intermediate need and a far-sighted vision. It is